Why do you keep playing? For a lot of people, the answer is obvious. I'm having fun. And that is not something that needs to be argued against. Most of the time, when you play a single-player game, or a game that you are, at least, playing alone, the time where you quit is probably right around the time where you look around and go, hey, wait a minute, I'm not having fun anymore. This can also apply to multiplayer games, of course. However, sometimes we continue playing a game way beyond the point where we stopped having fun with it. And why is that? I would argue this tendency is a lot stronger with MMOs than it is with simply multiplayer games or even single-player games. But, of course, not exclusive to MMOs. But whether it is Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2, old or new school RuneScape, or an entirely fifth thing, MMOs have some traits that can make them particularly difficult to put down, even when you might no longer be having fun. And sometimes, these traits can even convince you that you are having fun with the game, even if it is something else that keeps you around. This is not meant as an attack on any particular game, but rather the recognition that so-called live service games tend to be ever-evolving and definitely will have their dry periods, and what sometimes keeps them alive through those periods are these tendencies that I would like to talk a bit about. And I would love to hear your opinion on the topic in the comments too, of course. 1. Habit. MMOs, or indeed live service games, often really want to be the game you play, not just a game you play. And if they can't do that, they often try hard to settle for no less than being one of the games you play every day. This causes you to develop a habit, and a day may feel wrong or unfinished if you don't check in. Some games do this by giving you a little reward every day that you do log in, as once you are online, it is much more likely you'll stick around. You're already logged in after all. Others do this by putting daily or weekly restrictions on tasks you would like to do, to give you reason to come back tomorrow, or at least next week, to continue whatever project you may have going on. In a sense, the reason you keep coming back, even at times when you aren't really having fun, whether you actually acknowledge this yourself or not, can sometimes be because your tendency to play a specific game is something you have internalized and identify yourself with. The reason you play is because that is what you do. To give an even more specific example to Final Fantasy XIV, while the game offers the player the opportunity to play any of the jobs in the game at any time with reasonably low restrictions, many players end up dedicating themselves wholeheartedly to one specific job for an extremely extended period. Sure, the mechanics of the game can make it difficult to progress gear-wise if you don't focus on one job or role. However, about halfway through a raid tier, it is typically relatively manageable to switch to other roles as you desire with much less severity. Not to mention that whenever a new raid tier arrives, nothing prevents you from turning a new leaf. Yet, despite this, some players will latch onto one specific job and force themselves to stick to it, even when changes in the game makes it less enjoyable or even unenjoyable. I'm not trying to shame anyone for choosing to do so, I'm simply pointing out here that in a similar fashion to the general idea of sticking to a game out of habit, some players stick to a specific job in a specific game out of habit. I play Black Mage. This is what I do. A somewhat interesting aspect of this reason to continue playing is that in my experience, and from hearing from others, this reason to, quote, keep playing when it stops being fun, unquote, is likely to be dispelled simply by taking time away from the specific thing. Just like building a habit requires you to choose to do it repeatedly, breaking a habit requires you to stop doing it. This is, perhaps, also why some players find, after taking a break from the game, that they find their interest reinvigorated, because they now can return to playing the game not out of habit, but out of actual interest again. 2. Achievements. Modern games tend to offer a lot of projects for you to work towards, with many single-player or simply multiplayer games offering achievements that often just requires you to play the game, and many of them will dump right into your lap. With MMOs, often due to offering a lot of different tasks you can choose to accomplish, a lot of optional tasks one might say, there are often many tasks and objectives you choose to do rather than randomly will stumble upon by regular play. Because MMOs are always long-term investments, one could say, these projects and achievements can sometimes be extremely time-consuming to fulfill or could rely on daily or weekly restrictions to work through. You might start on a weeks or months or indeed even years-long project, and halfway through it, stop having fun, but at this point you're pushing through for the sake of the project you put yourself into. To again give some Final Fantasy XIV examples, this could be choosing to level all jobs to maximum, or acquiring every single relic weapon of a specific expansion, or slaying 1,000 S-rank hunt marks, or clearing every deep dungeon solo with every combat job, or setting yourself on the 7-year journey that is getting all the Live Quest achievements. Indeed, Final Fantasy XIV has achievements so long that optimally preparing for it would require you to plan your journey so far in advance that you can assume multiple expansions will take place during it, which might just change the way this specific achievement is obtained too. Many of these kinds of projects, of course, also inherently produce the habit tendency, as they would themselves require you to log in like every day to progress them in a reasonable time frame. 3. Nostalgia. MMOs themselves are a rather specific genre of games, and while anyone could play them, the amount of time and effort these games expect of you to, quote, properly enjoy them, unquote, is often a huge deterrent for a lot of people. These games also tend to be very expensive in both directions. They're typically very expensive for the user, even if all you do is pay the bare minimum. Simultaneously, MMOs are so expensive to make that it is a colossal investment for a company to try and make one, not to mention maintain one. Add to this that due to the expected investment into the game of the player being so high, it often requires quite a sales pitch to get it started in the first place. And this gets even more complex when most MMOs, if not all MMOs, kind of require a reasonably large player base to properly function. And while an MMO can sometimes make it work with a smaller player base by reducing the amount of things you can do, that is sometimes just a temporary solution. What the big MMOs of today often have in common is that they either are based on another popular game or franchise, or itself is so old that it became big enough to itself be the selling point in that specific aspect. World of Warcraft being based on the hugely popular Warcraft franchise, at least back then, Elder Scrolls Online being based on the hugely popular Elder Scrolls franchise, and indeed Final Fantasy XIV being based on, big shocker, the hugely popular Final Fantasy franchise. Meanwhile, RuneScape itself is so old that it itself became a household name before MMOs seemingly needed to have a known background to get a proper foothold. And while Guild Wars 1, which Guild Wars 2 is based off of, wasn't necessarily a colossal mega hit, it came out as something similar to an MMO like WoW, and differentiated itself by being a cheaper game to get invested in, I would say, that also demanded a bit less of your time, while also putting its endgame focus significantly differently. This nostalgia angle makes it very hard for other new MMOs, let alone other games, to get attention if someone is already very or fully invested in an MMO, as if you have already played a specific MMO every day for 3, 5, 8, 10, 20 years, then sometimes it doesn't really matter what the other game has, because it doesn't have that thing your favorite MMO has. and even if it does, it might just not be the same because of all the time you invested in the game you're already playing. Also known as 4. Sunk cost fallacy. All of the 3 prior subjects each represent some aspect of the sunk cost fallacy. The habit of playing the game every single day itself causes you to invest a huge amount of yourself into the game, and now that you are so invested that you might identify yourself with the game, tossing it aside now, just because maybe you aren't having fun today, might waste all the effort you already put in, and who knows, maybe you'll have fun tomorrow. That achievement you have been working towards for the past year won't ever be completed if you stop now. And if you quit this game, you have all these accomplishments and nostalgic memories in. Will it all have been for nothing? More specifically to the fallacy itself, it all relates to how, if you're already playing one MMO, it is almost impossible to pick up another one. All that you invested in the first one can't be carried over to the second, so why would you switch over? In the context of Final Fantasy XIV, a particularly common example of this sunk cost fallacy is in relation to housing, which is a somewhat controversial topic. If you don't log in and visit your house for an extended period of time, you lose it, such that someone else can purchase that plot. I'm not going to get into this whole discussion about how housing should or should not be. However, an argument could be made that if you are not having fun and have not been having fun for a long time, and the one thing keeping you is the house, then it could be argued that you probably don't need the house. But that's easy to say. Another example is how, often, an individual might be less likely to quit during the progression of a raid tier, as similarly it may feel like it was all for nothing if you don't finish, which can also sometimes lead to how some players having difficulty with beating a raid tier may feel more desperate to clear it in the end. Combining a bit with the nostalgia angle, I've also met many players that stick around essentially because they stuck around, or more precisely, I've cleared every single raid tier on release since so-and-so. And what makes this habit so hard to break is the simple fact that this might have been a tradition of yours for, I don't know, half a decade, and that line of trophies just won't be the same with one missing, should you come back. 5. The social aspect. Again, somewhat related to all of the previous subjects, mainly because a lot of the social aspects themselves come about through the time investment caused by the other subjects. While not guaranteed, it is incredibly likely you would find friends in an MMO that you log in to play every day, or find communities to play with for some of those achievements you might be working on. Or at the very least, in the years you have played, you probably made some friendships. And indeed, it is very possible those friendships don't actually have anything else in common than this game, which in a weird twist puts a bit of sunk cost fallacy on these friendships as well. In my experience, and based on stories I've been told by others, this is by far the strongest hook a game, or notably an MMO, can have on a player. If the game is legitimately not fun anymore, it may be difficult to convince yourself to log in every day. Eventually, that daily login bonus will seem pointless because you can't be bothered to do anything with it. Those daily or weekly logouts are meaningless because you didn't plan to do those anyway. And while progressing mindlessly on an achievement or project every day might keep you going for a while, even that may lose its charm if it isn't any fun. And one day, the game may move far enough away from the nostalgia that it simply isn't the same anymore. And so, the sunk cost strangely diminishes as the value of the investment itself does. One of the most common reasons I see players quit an MMO is the fact that their friends quit. The communities they were part of diminished and died out. And the thing is, while this can happen as a result of the game itself becoming bad or failing in some way or another, sometimes it happens simply because people can have enough of something. While some people will be satisfied working the same job, having the same daily routine, eating the same things every day for 30 plus years, yes really, this of course doesn't apply to everyone, and eventually playing a game, even if it stayed the same for all that time, or didn't, you might eventually just get bored of it. Eventually, you finish every project you cared to do, even with more things being added. And then either you, or maybe your friends, move on, and someone is left behind. They either find new friends to play with, or might just quit too. 6. So baby, why do I? It should probably come as no surprise that even I, the stoic, magnificent, infallible content creator man, also have had periods where Final Fantasy XIV just isn't quite doing it for me. And there are things that frustrate me about the game, but I'm still here. When I need a break, I usually focus more on other games, outside of making content. And while you might think the real true attachment I have in the game is, well, you are making content specifically on this game, what really keeps me around is that I have so many friends in the game. As a result of this channel, the community itself is like a big friend group, at least to me sometimes. And at times, Final Fantasy XIV is simply the place this group meets. That is to say, there have definitely been times with Final Fantasy XIV where, if not for the fact I run this channel, I probably would have quit, at least for a period of time. But in a roundabout way, the reason for that is because of the community surrounding this channel, and not because I need to make content and Final Fantasy XIV happens to be the subject matter. So, what is it that keeps you playing? Whether it is Final Fantasy XIV or a completely different game, I would love to hear your stories. Maybe you feel like I overlooked an angle to this conversation, in which case I would also love to hear about that in the comments. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, the first time I quit Final Fantasy XIV was back in Stormblood. 1 week after I had purchased a small house in Shirogane, right next to my free company at the time. Not exactly my brightest moment right there.